I want to introduce Jerry Burton next. Jerry's written a number of books on cars and Corvettes during his time at Campbell Ewald. Spent a lot of time with Elfie, and he remembers all of us. And becoming one of her confidants in her later years. Jerry's the guy that came up with the heartbeat of America as the tagline for all of our Chevys. And he's probably been in all of our houses more than we know with all the advertising slogans that he developed for the Chevrolet Motor Division over the years. So here's a guy that's been privileged to run with all the Corvette and Chevrolet hierarchy for many years, and been privileged to have the inside scoop on so many of these situations. And today he's going to talk a little bit about the side of Zora's life that none of us were really exposed to. So hope you enjoy this program, and welcome Jerry Burton.
First off, I want to thank the Michaelis brothers and Werner here for including me in this session. It's a great honor to be here today. And after hearing Russ McLean's presentation, once again, here's a man who took an enormous risk to keep this car alive. And I think that, Dave Hill once told me that, when you work on Corvette, it's almost like you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And there have been so many exceptional people that have been involved with this car. And it really explains why it is the true icon that it is today. Around the world, not just in the United States. So I'm here to talk about one of them, Zora. And just a little bit of background, I got to know Zora back during my days at Auto Week magazine. A good friend of mine, George Levy, had invited me over, and I had a chance to go up to his den and watch him driving up Pikes Peak in Cert 1 and doing the Daytona beach runs and so forth. But to be able to do that, on old VCR and TV with Zora himself, I just had to pitch myself that it was just such a great opportunity. And I got to know him, and he became a really easy guy to know. I was surprised that I became friends with him. We'd have lunch once a month or something like that, and I got to know Elfie, and I think one of the reasons a lot of people had talked about doing Zora's book back when he was alive, and he approached quite a few people about doing his book. But I think that it was actually a little bit easier to do it after Zora had passed, believe it or not, because he had, for number one, he had been interviewed by another author that was attempting to write his story. And there were something like 40 hours of tapes available on Zora. And I just think I had a chance, Zora was kind of well known for trying to write his own story. So I think that the advantage I had was that I had Elfie and I had a lot of people to help me. And I had an opportunity to really write an unvarnished approach. You all know who Zora was, and again, my purpose today is to kind of give you some of the background that he brought to General Motors. Keep in mind that in 1953, when Zora came to GM, there wasn't a racing program. They were just coming off of World War II and the Depression, and just trying to keep up with the post-war demand for family transportation at Chevrolet. So, a sports car wasn't high on the list of urgent things Chevrolet needed. But Zora had this enormous background, which I'm going to share with you in terms of things he brought to the table here. So, first off, I want to just talk about some of the highlights of what Zora experienced and what Zora did. He witnessed the Russian Revolution in 1917. He was actually born in Brussels, Belgium, but of Russian parents. So he was raised in St. Petersburg. His parents were kind of interesting, and not exactly Ozzy and Harriet here. They were, his mother was a Bolshevik, and his father was a mining engineer. But his mother actually was a high-ranking official for Lenin. He learned how to race motorcycles from Burton, the famous driver. He was educated in some of Russia's and Germany's finest technical schools along the way. To make money on the side, he smuggled gold out of France into Belgium. Later on, when he moved across Europe, using the late 1930s Ford powered by a flathead V8. He joined the French Air Force during World War II and trained as a bombardier. He escaped from Nazi-occupied France without papers and managed to get his whole family out based on his own resourcefulness. And came to America via Ellis Island in 1940 aboard a rat-infested refugee ship from Lisbon. Also, Zora brought quite an engineering background with him to General Motors. He was back during his days in Germany. I should explain that Zora was raised in St. Petersburg, but his parents were transferred to Germany by the Russian government. So he was actually spent some of his education in Germany at the University of Charlottenburg. He started off as an electrical engineer major, but then switched to mechanical engineering shortly thereafter. But during the time he was a student, he became a protege of Arnold Zora, who was one of the developers of superchargers in Germany. And he actually wrote a highly theoretical paper on supercharging that was published in Auto, Motor, and Sport, which is one of the, it still exists today, and that's one of the best-known German auto magazines. He also designed tractors, narrow-gauge mining locomotives, and lathes, all while in his 20s. And all of these saw production. When he came to America in 1940, he found work almost immediately as an engineering consultant, and ended up consulting for some of the top U.S. defense companies during World War II, including Remington Rand, Wright Aeronautical, and Republic Aviation. After the war, he started his own company called Ardor Mechanical, which manufactured many specialized war munitions, such as ship propeller shafts, bomb cones, and distributor valves for aircraft engines. So that's kind of just a quick overview of some of the stuff Zora did. Zora celebrates today, obviously, because of his role with the Corvette, and you all know that he took many, many risks in his career in order to really champion this car. And today, I think you could still argue that if there is one person who personifies the Corvette, it's Zora Arkus-Duntov. Zora's best known, of course, for his association with the Stingray, even though when he started in '53, the Stingray was really his first complete car. And of course, it elevated the Corvette to a whole new plateau of performance. He was, he developed the independent rear suspension that went into the '63 Corvette. Really took upon himself to, from the time he came in 1953, brought the Corvette up to a much higher level of performance than where it started. So let's go back real quickly, and I'm going to work back up to some of the more details here. Zora was born in Brussels on Christmas 1909. This is a shot of Zora and his brother Europe. His folks met as they were in Brussels, university students studying abroad. And a year after Zora was born, they moved back to St. Petersburg, or Petrograd, as it was called then. Again, his mother, very left-leaning into politics. She was in the Social Revolutionary Party. And Zora actually saw, when he was 7 years old, he actually witnessed the Russian Revolution going on in the streets of St. Petersburg. His mother landed a high-level position in the Russian government. His dad was a mining engineer. He was very intellectual. And Zora became a voracious reader under the guidance of especially his father. Yura, his brother, was about 7 years younger, and Zora often played the role of caretaker to Yura, and managed to get both of them in trouble quite a bit. We talked about guns earlier. Zora actually found a gun at an early age that he restored. It's an old Smith & Wesson, and he used that to protect the family's bread rations. So you wonder, he was born Zora Arkus, so where does the Duntov part come from? Well, his mother was quite a, I guess what we would call a liberated woman, and she was very free with having affairs with various men. And one of them was the famous Russian artist Mark Chagall. But her most passionate affair was with a guy named Joseph Duntov, who was an electrical engineer. And they had such a hot and heavy affair that she invited Joseph to actually move into the household with Zora's father and her. So, two fathers in the same household. Not exactly Ozzie and Harry. And later on, back in the 40s, is when Zora actually added the word Duntov to his last name, because he actually liked and respected both men. And, Zora was that typical kid, a lot of, liked to do a lot of risky things, very interested in anything mechanical. There weren't that many cars in St. Petersburg back then, so he was into bicycles and ships and trains, streetcars, eventually motorcycles, and then automobiles. And when he was 15 years old, he actually designed and built a propeller-powered snowmobile. And when he was 16 years old, his folks moved to Berlin, and his stepfather had been transferred here by the Soviet government. And he stayed in Leningrad for a year before following his parents to Germany. And in the fall of 27, he enrolled at the University of Darmstadt, and eventually switched over to the University of Charlotte, which I understand is kind of like similar to an MIT. So in Germany, there weren't that many automobiles in Russia at the time, but in Germany it was kind of a different story. And Germany was a hotbed of automotive activity, technology, and so Zora, quickly got into the mechanical engineering curriculum there, and while he was at the university, he actually designed a diesel tractor, which went into limited production by a company called Primus, which is still in business today, selling tractors. Zora wasn't afraid to network, no matter who he was, and here Zora was of Jewish extraction. He was from Russia, but that didn't stop him from connecting with none other than probably the first major racing czar in the automotive world, a guy named Alfred Neubauer, who was running the Grand Prix operation for Mercedes-Benz, which was pretty high-level stuff going on. At the time, Mercedes, companies like Auto Union, were actually getting direct support from the German government, because I think they felt that racing engine development might have some applications, for war purposes. And Zora also connected with people at Auto Union, and but again, given Zora's background and so forth, he just wasn't quite able to connect, given his Jewish origins. But he did have a rich friend in Berlin, a guy named Asha Orlin. And he was the son of a rich banker and had a lot of bucks. So he ended up racing MG. And Asha, his friend, did most of the driving, but Zora eventually got a chance to get in and drive. And you know, again, they didn't win a lot of races, but it was Zora's first chance to really have some hands-on experience as a race car. World War II came on, and by this point, Zora had moved to Paris, kind of sensing what was going on. And when the war broke out, Zora joined the French Air Force as a bombardier, and later escaped from Nazi-occupied France, came to America, and immediately found work analyzing the polyharmonic dampers for naval ships. And as I said, he started consulting for the U.S. companies during the war effort, and eventually started Arden Mechanical. And during that time, actually constructed a jet helicopter in his Manhattan shop. This is almost like a Forrest Gump type of existence this guy had. We all know Ford brought out the flathead V8, you know, back in 1932, and you know, following the war, that was really the engine in terms of anyone who wanted to do any hot rodding. That was the only affordable V8 that was out there. The overhead valve engines didn't come along until a little bit later. And but Zora was kind of a visionary and saw the potential for a kit that he could convert a Ford flathead into an overhead valve V8. And this became the Arden V8. And he was hoping originally to sell this idea to Ford as a way of increasing horsepower in Ford pickups. The reason pickups is because pickups had a large enough engine bay to be able to accommodate these big, fat overhead valves. But despite high hopes, you know, Ford really wasn't quite ready to devote a lot of attention to this, and Zora really didn't have the development money to make it work. So eventually Arden kind of went out of business, but it's still well known today because some other hot rodders out in Southern California really took that technology and perfected it themselves. The other thing that kind of hurt Arden was the fact that by 1949, Cadillac developed its overhead valve engine, and there were Olds had an engine that they were developing, and then eventually Chrysler had the original Hemi and so forth. But interestingly enough, the Arden used hemispherical heads on the motor. And some have theorized that Chrysler got the idea from looking at Zora's engine. Zora was also fancied himself as a racer. And, I think in Zora's case, he thought he was more of a racer sometimes than he was an engineer. Anyway, he attempted in 1947 and 1948 to qualify for the Indy 500 in a pre-war Talbot. He was unsuccessful in terms of qualifying for the race, but interestingly enough, Luigi Panetti, who became famous for importing Ferraris into North America, turned out to be his crew chief. After Arden kind of fell apart, Zora wanted to stay involved in racing and ended up connecting with Sidney Allard, who was building low-volume sports cars over in England. Sidney was kind of an early version of Carroll Shelby. He liked to dump big V8s into these lightweight, cycle-fendered alloys. And he originally used the Arden for a while in the Allard J2, And eventually, people started racing those things with Cadillac V8s in them and Chrysler Firepower V8s and so forth. So, it was a nice connection for Zora for a while, and allowed Zora to actually do some racing. But again, Allard was kind of a relatively crude, underfunded operation. And Zora, after living in the United States and so forth, I think thought, well, I think there's still going to be more opportunity in the States than there is in Europe. So he comes back to the U.S. in 1952, and he settled in the New York area. There's not a whole lot of automotive jobs in New York at that time, but he ended up at Fairchild Aviation, where he was assigned to develop a turbine blade for a heavy water atomic compressor. We don't know a whole lot about this because it was very top secret stuff, but Fairchild at the time was working on a program to develop a nuclear-powered airplane, and that project was never completed. So, 1953, he's still working for Fairchild, and happens to stroll in through the turnstiles of the General Motors Motorama at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and stumbles across this white sports car, EX-122, with Corvette on the side of it, thanks to Byron Scott. And of course, you all know that Motorama was this great forum for Harley to show off all of these great well-made designs. And really, when you think about it, this was the precursor of a modern auto show. There really was nothing else quite like it out there. It was a brilliant thing, I think, for GM to do. And Corvette was one of the many concept cars present, but I think the die was already set that this thing was going to go into production. Of course, it was love at first sight for Zora. He had never seen a more beautiful car, but in sizing it up, he realized, okay, this has a Blue Flame 6 that goes back to the late 20s. 2-speed automatic transmission, and when you look back to be fair about the original Corvette, this was really the work of Maurice Alley, who was also in the Corvette Hall of Fame. And I thought Maurice did a very credible job of using available parts to put together a pretty decent sports car. It just needed more power and more developed suspension. And Zora knew exactly what needed to be done to really make this thing a real sports car. So he pulled out all the stops and wrote letters to all sorts of people at GM. His connection, though, with Allard kind of helped him because the car owner for one of his Allard racing endeavors was General Curtis LeMay. General Curtis LeMay was the head of the U.S. Strategic Air Command, and was quite a racing advocate. He was the one who actually had the idea of allowing servicemen to race their cars on U.S. Air Force bases, and actually devoted hangar space and Air Force facilities for people to work on their car. It was kind of thought it would be a nice incentive for car people to be able to maintain that involvement even when they're in the service. But, so Zora gets into GM, but he starts on May 1st, 1953. And like a week after he starts, he tells his boss, Maurice Allard, that, oh, by the way, I've got a racing commitment in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be driving at Le Mans for a competitor. That didn't go down too well. And, he comes back from Le Mans. He's assigned to work on not the Corvette, but they put him out to the GM equivalent of Siberia. He worked on school bus drivetrains at the Milford Proving Grounds. But it wasn't long before he was back working on Corvette again. And one of the things that helped that along was he wrote a extremely influential visionary document that's enshrined at the National Corvette Museum. It's called Thoughts Pertaining to Youth, Hot Rods, and Chevrolet. And he really laid the blueprint for how Chevrolet could lose its stodgy image that had kind of acquired after World War II. And, you know, with the advent of the small block and the fresh new 55 Chevrolet that was coming, that, you know, the idea of the Chevrolet created a very robust performance parts catalog that they could really seize the day from Ford, because of the small block already had so that really kind of put him back on the map. But he still wasn't driving, he wasn't done driving at Le Mans for competitors. He raced for Allard for 2 years, 53 and 54. And then in 1955, I'm sorry, 1950, he raced it for Allard in 52, 53, and then in 54, he raced for Porsche, and also raced for Porsche in 1955. Suddenly, this wasn't as much of a corporate problem as it was when we first did it in 53, and I think Ed Cole, his boss, was warming to the idea of learning what GM could learn from some of these other competitors. Don't forget, GM was not racing at the time, and I think Cole fancied the idea of a racing program, but there wasn't any of the infrastructure at General Motors to do that. And you know, they were starting from scratch. So the idea of what Zora could learn from Porsche was deemed pretty valuable. And I think the other thing that's kind of going on was this whole idea of developing air-cooled engines was, that led up to the Corvette, was intriguing to Cole. And I think he wanted to learn what he could from that. And interestingly enough, when Zora, by the way, won his class both years, he was in the 1100cc class. He was driving a 550 Spider and did really well. He was he won in 55 despite the fact that was the year of the huge crash that killed some 80 people. Probably still the worst single tragedy in motorsports. But anyway, when Zora got back, there's a memo that I found in his archive. It's about 25 or 30 pages long, but it described all of the learnings that he brought back with him from Porsche. But all of this was leading up to starting to put Chevrolet on the map in terms of the performance world. And one of Zora's first demonstrations of performance was with a disguised 1956 Chevrolet driving up Pikes Peak. And this was, again, Chevrolet's first real performance demonstration. And in covering the 12.42 mile route in 17 minutes and 24 seconds, he beat the old production record by over 2 minutes. So you can imagine driving up Pikes Peak in bias-ply tires in a 56 Chevy with no guardrails. So anyway, Cole was so pleased with all that he said, hey, let's, he was quite warm to Zora's proposal then to set a 150 mile an hour mark at Daytona Beach. And so Zora set out to hop up that small block to the point where he thought he could average 150 going both ways on the sand. But in order to get the necessary horsepower, Zora took the camshaft he had actually developed for the Argus V8 and applied it to the small block. And that became known as the Duntov can. Of course, that run, which most people are aware of, represented really, the first true performance demonstration for the Corvette. And 150 is a pretty magical number to hit back then. That led to fuel injection. And Zora, of course, played an instrumental role in that. We worked with John Dolza from Rochester Products to develop a mechanical fuel injection system. It provided 1 horsepower for every cubic inch of engine displacement, and became an option for the 57 Corvette and 57 Chevrolet. And Zora earned 3 patents for his contributions on that. And I think Ken Kaiser here can probably talk in detail about that fuel injection system this afternoon. You might wonder, Zora fancied himself as a race driver, but why didn't you see Zora behind the wheel more as a driver? And again, those opportunities, at least at GM, didn't exist in the early 50s. And, Zora, in a sense, because of what he was learning and what he was bringing to the table, became almost too valuable to race at GM, race for GM. Interestingly enough, in Zora's retirement materials, there was a book that had a letter from Briggs Cunningham talking about the 1960 effort at Le Mans with Corvettes and how Briggs referenced Ed Cole's request to not allow Zora to drive. You all know the Corvette SS, that was the first purpose-built Corvette racer. The reason for that was that Zora was really quite interested in going for overall wins at places like Le Mans and Sebring. The Corvette was doing quite well beginning in 1956 in production class racing. But the SS represented a chance to go for the overall win. And this turned out to be quite a remarkable car based on a Mercedes 300 SL chassis, but they really didn't have the time to develop a full-blown chassis of their own. And the timetable on this thing was extremely short. But in the development for this car, they developed a mule that looked different from this. This is the Harley shiny magnesium body version of the race car. But the mule car turned out to be extremely fast, and both Lon Fangio and Sterling Moss actually drove this thing during practice for Sebring that year, and came close to setting the track record. John, do you remember what they actually beat the track record or not? It was stunning how quick the car was. But again, what happened is GM's adherence to a new policy by the American Manufacturers Association against motor racing caused them to pull out completely from motor racing along with lower prices. I think that there's probably some hangover from the tragedy of Le Mans in 1955. And I think they were also concerned about whether racing was setting the wrong example for young people learning to drive. Zora also was quite the mid-engine advocate, and I always believed that mid-engine cars were the race driver because of their superior balance and handling. At least back then. You could argue now whether that's still true, but I think it probably is. But his dream was to build a mid-engine production Corvette, and he actually started drawing sketches and playing around with it as early as 1957. He built many Corvette concepts along the way, including Series 1, which is an open-wheel car that actually was a prototype of the 63 kind of rear. And Serve 2 was actually a four-wheel drive sports racer. And again, probably not, it was a car that, believe it or not, at the time, Zora was competing with several other factions within GM to build sports racing cars. Frank Winchell was also working with Chaparral. The original Grand Sport was a prototype for the Chaparral racing. Why didn't GM build a production mid-engine car? I think the irony in many ways was the fact that the Corvette was starting to be successful in the late 50s, early 60s, and suddenly the definition of the car, I think, became pretty well separate people. And there was a reluctance as the Corvette became more successful to change that formula. Stingray, of course, most memorable Corvette Zora was associated with. It really wasn't the car Zora wanted to build. It was quite, my book talks a lot about the battle between Zora and Bill Mitchell. And one of the things that Bill Mitchell had a lot of clout, a lot more clout actually in the corporation than Zora did. And Mitchell was king, and the annual design changes that would happen in the main design staff so important to the equation. And Bill still liked that long, good, short deck look. Zora would have preferred a far more balanced car. And the Stingray, of course, was pretty terrible aerodynamically as well. I'm not doing justice here to the original Z06, I know, but Z06 was the first attempt to really take the Stingray production car and make it into a competitive racer. And there was a lightweight version of the production car. There's Franz, where are you here? Franz is working on a big project involving the Z06. And there's quite a story behind that I can't do justice to right now, given my time. But obviously, there's some of those out here. They're very valuable Corvettes today. Grand Sports were even more valuable. This was an opportunity to take like 1,000 pounds out of the curb weight of the production Corvette. And the irony is that Grand Sport really didn't win that many high-profile races. But because only 5 of these things were built, and at the time that Nassau Speed Weeks event was so high up on the radar that when the Grand Sport did well there, it was a big deal. And it probably represented the peak of Stingray racing in that. Zora also managed an engine group at GM, created a lot of really exotic engines, with 4 valves per cylinder, overhead cams, 3 valves per cylinder. Here he is pictured on a 1967 cover of Hot Rod magazine. The Aerovette was probably Zora's last great hope for a mid-engine car that was powered originally by a 4-rotor Wankel that developed over 400 horsepower. It was fairly lightweight, and it had the ability to adopt a 4-wheel drive. That happened in around 1974-75 time period. And by the time that Zora reached mandatory retirement age, it was 1975. And Zora had high hopes of continuing on as a General Motors consultant. He felt that he still had a lot to offer, and I think he still thought that achieving his dream of a mid-engine Corvette was still possible. But at the time, as you well know, that is kind of the low ebb for performance in general. Here we had the advent of new safety regulations, emission controls, unleaded gas. The 1975 Corvette was down to 210 horsepower. and there were only 2 engine choices. So for Zora, it was actually probably a pretty good time to retire, and a pretty challenging time for his successor, Dave McClellan, to kind of figure out a way to climb the mountain again. But anyway, Zora did a number of things in his retirement, including consulting for DeLorean. And DeLorean, of course, was in the process of trying to develop his own sports car, this DMC-12. Zora was one of many different people that contributed ideas to this car, including Colin Chapman from Lotus, and Bill Collins from Pontiac, and I think Chaparral was also involved. But it became kind of a hodgepodge of a car, and Zora, I have a whole stack of correspondence between Zora and DeLorean on this. And Zora became increasingly critical of the car and warned DeLorean about the mistakes he was making with this thing. But by then it was too late. The cocaine accusation came down, which DeLorean ended up beating, but you know, I think he was still pretty well stained by that whole thing. Interestingly enough, though, DeLorean attempted to purchase some of the designs for Zora's mid-engine car. He was very interested in maybe using that Aerovet as the original basis for the DMC. Zora also consulted for Holley after his retirement. He developed a special high-performance aftermarket manifold called the Z manifold. He also did some work for Buick on that Indy V6 turbo engine. After his retirement, Zora, of course, was a fixture at a lot of different Corvette shows. I'm sure many of you have Zora autographs or have met Zora from time to time. He was really quite a great ambassador. He loved all of the attention and the admiration. He was very closely involved with NCRS, served as an honorary judge, and of course was the major guest of honor at the 1994 opening of the National Corvette Museum. His final push for fame was in the mid-1990s. Zora had started flying. He bought a Rockwell Commander back probably in the early 1980s, I guess it was. And was well known for flying around, the Detroit area and so forth. His Russian accent kind of caused some problems from time to time with air traffic control. And he had the traffic controllers had a hard time understanding Zora because he suffered from a stroke back in 1969 and had never really recovered in terms of his voice and so forth. And Zora was always very slow of speaking too. I mean, a brilliant guy, but you had to really be patient with Zora and listen and let him say what he's going to say. Don't try to complete his sentences for him, because he really was a brilliant man and tremendously courageous. But anyway, his last hurrah was he bought this BB-5 airplane, which is a lightweight home-built plane, and his plan was to break a piston-powered speed record at Oshkosh during the experimental aircraft flying. So he acquired a 3-cylinder Metro turbo engine from someone at Chevy, and Gib Hofstetter was helping him initially on this thing, but Zora's health was rapidly deteriorating at that point, and Gib actually admitted to me that he was starting to hide parts from him because he just didn't want Zora to finish this airplane. It was an extremely touchy airplane to fly, and it has been a very startling crash rate on these things. So, although I joined Zora, I think he probably would have enjoyed better going into the wall, a turn forward Indy, or flying one of these things into the ground and dying in bed. Dying in bed is kind of what he did. He Zora was a heavy smoker and had quit smoking since the early 1990s, but in the summer of '95 he was diagnosed with lung cancer and didn't undergo any kind of treatment for it because of his advanced age, and he died in April of '96 at the age of 1986. What do we take from Zora's life? Well, obviously, an engineering genius. You look at all the things he did at a very young age, and the things that he did that saw production pretty remarkable. He was quite a maverick and a risk taker. I mean, things like that Grand Sport program were done despite the ban on GM racing. His plan was to, build enough of these cars to homologate them and let his customers do the racing. And his whole plan was, let's keep things alive by just offering the parts and the expertise. And he was very much available to anyone who needed advice. He was very giving of his time. He was a real fish out of water when he came to General Motors. Here he is, a Russian Jew, in a very waspish environment. Didn't play golf with the Bloomfield Hills Country Club like a lot of his peers. He and his wife Elfie preferred, they had a Chris Craft with a couple of big block Chevys that take off across Lake St. Clair and go to North over Parsons Island there. But when you think about it, Zora arguably is the most famous non-executive in GM history. He loved the Corvette so much that he wanted to stay with that program. He was the foremost champion advocate for the car. He really became the personification of the Corvette, even though his name wasn't on the building. It's not like Ferrari or Porsche or Bugatti. He worked for General Motors, and for him to have that legacy and to be an outsider. English was his fourth language, okay? He had to learn Russian, German, French, and English, and he spoke all of them. So for him, when you think about how so many of us get hung up on bureaucracy, there's little obstacles that get in the way of doing what we want to do. And you look at a guy like that who constantly steered around obstacles, working for a company that really didn't appreciate or care what he was doing. He was more of an annoyance than anything else. And yet he was a maverick. And, none of us would be here today talking about these cars as it weren't for Zora Arkus-Duntov. And as I said, he's one of the greater figures in automotive history. Even in his homeland of Russia, they did an exhibit honoring him. In May 2012, there was an organization called the Alexander Solzhenitsyn Center for Russian Emigres, and they opened up a 6-week-long exhibit honoring Zora's career. And I was privileged to travel to Moscow and actually speak at the opening of that exhibit. And the fact that with Russia no longer having any auto industry, this was big news that a Russian was associated with an iconic car like the Corvette. So got a lot of media attention. I spent a week over there doing a number of different media interviews and actually appeared on the Russian version of Speed TV. Here's some shots from the exhibit. They had a number of different halls with photos and artifacts and so forth. And a local Corvette even showed up at the event there. That's a big Batman decal. And here I am giving kind of an overview of his life toward the opening of this exhibit. And present at the exhibit was a member of the U.S. consulate who happened to be from Detroit, and he told the group about Woodward Avenue and American car culture, Woodward Dream Cruise, and so forth. So that was kind of fun. What's next for Zora? Actually, a primetime documentary was also produced on Zora's life that aired last spring in Russia. It had a viewership of 15 million people. And, one of my unfulfilled dreams is I'd still like to find a way to sell the idea of a feature film on Zora's life, because it was really an epic life. He brought so much to the table at GM, really established the, you know, the underpinnings of a lot of what we take for granted today in terms of racing and performance car technology and so forth. And I think his accomplishments were what inspired all of his successors to do the great work that they have done to keep this car alive and arguably the most successful sports car in the world. So anyway, that's it. I know it's kind of a 10,000-foot flyover here, a lot to talk about, but it's all in my book. I did bring 10 copies of the book. If anyone is interested in buying one, I'll be happy to sign it for you. They're $30 a piece. And I'm happy to entertain any questions before we have lunch.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for sharing these great stories with us.